Okay, we're at Bio-Europe Spring today, and I'm talking to Regina Hodits, who's managing partner of Wellington Partners. So, Regina, you started as a scientist. What attracted you to the world of investment?
Well, when I was a scientist, I actually was lucky that I was working in a very translational center. I was at the MRC in Cambridge in the early 90s. That was the beginning of antibody engineering and of a new era of biologics, and that really fascinated me. And I tried also to play my part, and I was actually trying to cure the common cold.
Okay.
And that actually did work quite well in the test tube. But when we actually discussed this with pharma partners, this was a prophylactic treatment, I have to say, they were not quite amused and actually thought that the cost of goods for such a treatment would probably be several tens of factors too high for actually ever being considered for development. And that taught me that all my science wasn't actually going to see daylight if I didn't know anything about economics. And then I switched career and via consulting came into investing.
Okay, so what do you think are the hot areas to invest in right now?
Well, we believe that the hot areas always remain the same. It's actually things that in the end help patients and are accepted by doctors and are affordable by the healthcare system. I think that's what investing in healthcare is all about.
But no, I mean more like, are there any hot topics that are really, really interesting right now?
Yeah, but again what are the hot topics? What is still out there? What do people die of? They die of cancer, they die of cardiac, metabolic diseases. And one of the issues that we still haven't tackled is, for example, all the regenerative processes that we would need to get away from all the fibrosis of our organs. And that also includes then also degenerative with regards to neuroindications. I think you'll have to start from the medical need, and it's still kind of there, and this is how we look at the world.
So I saw there was an interesting one that I think you guys were a big investor on the other day. Was it Sniper Biome's Series A? I thought that was quite an interesting company because it's sort of combining, it's the only one I've seen that sort of combines the sort of CRISPR gene editing with the microbiome side of things.
Right, and we've been following that area for quite a while, and we were not quite sure what to make of all the microbiome story. And I don't want to reduce Sniper to that, and that would certainly not do justice to the platform. But what actually got us excited was that they have an initial proposition that is testable in the clinic, where they really just go after eradicating certain bacteria that cause infections in immune-compromised patients. And that pose a real big clinical issue and hamper all of the further treatment of those patients.
Okay, interesting. I think it certainly looks like an interesting company. So what, I mean, more sort of specifically, what do you look for? I mean, you're very experienced now in this area. Like, I mean, what do you look for when you're choosing whether to invest in a company or not?
Well, as an investor, what we have to do is make money. So one of the things that is important for us is to understand what our customers want. And we have two sorts of customers. One of them are the public market investors, and the other ones are our strategic friends in big pharma, and we also do still some medtech and diagnostic. So we try to understand what could actually be on the menu in a couple of years down the road. And that's usually also on their side, driven very much by medical need. And then what we try to see is where can we actually make the biggest validation step, let's say in a 2 to 5 year time frame. And that usually weeds out a number of opportunities that are super exciting. And I'm a scientist at heart, so any technology platform gets me out of bed any time. But then my colleagues come in, they come from the medical side and say, and what do we do with it?
Yeah.
And that puts realism to it.
So it's good to, I guess, to have a panel of different people from different areas so they can all give their views on things like that. Yeah.
We believe that diversity in a team is important, so you'll see us we're nearly at parity now also with female and male, which I think is also something which is unusual, and where I have to compliment my colleagues that they actually bear with us, but the same also with regards to scientists and medics. And we actually believe that this is a recipe that's...
It's true, I know what you mean. I mean, you know, working as a science journalist, I had that as well. You see a lot of very exciting stuff coming up. You think, oh, that's great. And then you talk to the doctors and they say, well, yeah, but that's nowhere near the clinic. It's going to be years ahead.
Yeah, even if it's years ahead, we wouldn't even mind that, as long as basically there's a way to test a hypothesis that is in the end meaningful. And so very often you end up in scenarios where either the patients are not well enough again, or you can't even find them. So it's more the practical reasons that get in the way.
Interesting, okay. So, I mean, you've obviously been in this area now for a while, so I wonder if you could say, how do you think VC investment in the life sciences has changed over the last 10 years?
Over the last 10 years, we've come from an area where the 10 years before were really dire, and it was very, very hard to actually make any returns, especially on the European side, because the stock markets were so firmly closed. And with the reopening of the stock market following then 2009, after the financial crisis, the market became much more dynamic again, and also much more risk-taking. There was more money available in general for also approaches where it wasn't just like a me better or something that was a marginal improvement. And so over the last 10 years, we've seen bold new ideas coming through. And so you started off with something like Sniper around kind of gene editing. These are things that 10 years earlier you couldn't have even thought about. But the other thing actually, and that comes back to what we are doing, and we are not the only ones, is since the industry has kind of matured in the US now, we see investing in biotech has started in the 80s, so there is now a lot of people that have seen several cycles. People have become much more disciplined on actually saying, how can I actually invest into something that in the end is going to turn into a product? And especially in Europe, we see that. In the US, this has also been kind of the same up to 2014-15. Since then, there's also a number of more speculative investments that have been made there that probably over here we would err on not doing, but people can now afford to do them because there's enough capital to weed through also bold ideas until you actually find a path forward that you can translate.
That's interesting, because I've had a lot of people saying that Europe is very much more cautious. Do you think there's moved towards a more American way of thinking in that regard, or being a bit more risk-taking? Or
I think a bit more risk-taking in Europe is good. I'm myself quite cautious about saying let's throw a big amount of money after a team and they're going to work it out. That's somehow, yes, a team is very, very important, and that without a good team, the best idea cannot fly. But still, I think here in Europe, probably you'll find more people that say it is a combination of the team and the product. While in the US, you see a lot of people that say, these people have made money for us before, they know the area, why should I second guess what they are doing? We're not at that stage of teams that are recycling themselves in Europe yet. And I think if you came to that, it may change over here as well.
Okay. So do you think, how does Germany, you're based in Germany, how does it compare to the rest of Europe?
I think Germany is super.
Yeah.
Absolutely, it's the best geography to be in. No, honestly, the German-speaking countries have a lot to go for. I used to work in the UK before for a transatlantic fund. And of course, the UK ecosystem had more time to develop. And there are certain areas, like also the Danish ecosystem, where they have a very strong pharma, or the Swiss, they have a very strong pharma component that helps you along. What I think we do have in Germany is an extremely solid academic landscape, and a diverse one. So basically, Germany has been always a federalistic country, a country that didn't have only one hub, which is a disadvantage. In my view, a certain amount of kind of centralization is needed because you need to have teams that you can build together. But from a research perspective, we have a number of really good universities, and we have also really good extra university research organizations that are extremely well funded. So from a general science funding, probably Germany is like one of the best countries you can be in, and things like CRISPR actually have originated originally from Germany, Austria, depending on where you want to put it. And we also have very good translational funding. So that's something that really has developed over the last 20 years, and it's something that we also have always supported as much as we can from the sideline, of course, from where we are, that researchers can stay longer at the university than they can in a number of other countries to really see their science being translated into what could start to become a product candidate going forward. And with that respect, I think we're sitting in a very good country. We're sitting also in a country that used to have a very big pharma industry. A lot of those pharma companies have been merged and partly moved away, but there's still, we have a number of those also companies that are very dedicated to the German market, like for example Boehringer Ingelheim. There's a very strong kind of also focus on kind of having good research connections, and also partly with Bayer. And this is what I feel provides a very big hunting ground, and we feel actually very well set where we are.
Well, there aren't, as I understand it, there are not a huge number of German VCs. Is that the case?
I think this is a very true statement, and that actually goes even beyond the life science industry. I'm actually for this term the spokesperson of the German Private Equity and Venture Capital Association, and I just for one of the insurance companies had to make a list of all the funds that would consider investing in anything to do with healthcare. Wasn't a very long list at all.
Because I have heard, I mean, people have said, I think it's absolutely true what you say about German science, it's a very high level, but I mean, I have heard people say that the Germans can be a bit cautious when it comes to investing.
I think this is not a correct statement. The Germans as such, for example, our investor base for the initial Wellington funds is composed to a large part also of family offices. And in Germany there's a number of entrepreneurs, maybe not so much in healthcare, but in engineering, in automotives, that actually have made money and that have a very entrepreneurial mindset. And they also have their family offices invest in funds. But what Germany is lacking is the big pools of capital, like pension funds, endowment funds. They are not as prominent because Germany doesn't have a pension stock. So you end up with a landscape where you have huge capital collection companies like the insurance companies or the banks, but they are intrinsically not really well set up to invest in a quite dispersed small venture market. And so there's a discrepancy between the type of capital that we have and the type of funds that we have.
Interesting. Okay. So do you think there's any, I suppose I can ask you to speculate a little bit, but do you think there's any interesting exits or IPOs coming up that you might predict on the horizon in the next year?
Absolutely. There must be interesting exits and IPOs coming up, otherwise we're all out of business. Yeah, so I mean, you can never plan exits going on. And I mean, with regards to the IPO market, I mean, I'm not the best person to tell you about the stock market. So my colleague Regina is certainly the much better versed there. But what I actually found very encouraging over the last 10 years is that we have seen certain surges in the stock market, but we've also then seen times where actually the stock market has not continued to increase, and where also companies have been valued by experienced investors on the public side on their merits. And this is actually giving me personally at least the hope that we're going to see quality companies IPO. What I also really found very positive is that since we brought Oxford Immunotech to Nasdaq, which is now quite a while back, at that time it has still been a real uphill struggle to get European companies onto Nasdaq. And by now both Nasdaq has made it easier, but also the universe has become more coherent. So it's not that much of a big step anymore from companies to either graduate from Euronext to Nasdaq or actually even contemplate going to the stock market directly. So that door is wide open, and I think on the pharma side, it is clear that pharma is looking for innovation. You could see, we discussed this on the way over here, that even here at BioEurope, we see a very strong participation also from US pharma companies, and they really come here also with experienced team members and then really senior people to look at European opportunities, and that by itself, I think, also bodes well for what we could see.
I mean, what do you think about the new opportunities coming up in China in those areas? Do you, do you anticipate doing any deals with that area?
Well, I've invested in China in 2005, exited in 2010, which I think was the golden age of kind of opening up of the Chinese market at that point in time. We would be very cautious. I mean, just also, we're a medium-sized fund placed in the center of Europe. There's a lot of opportunities located around us, so we do look at the Chinese market as much as we look at the US market as well for development. I think there will be more opportunities to jointly develop products, and several of our portfolio companies, of course, have clinical trials ongoing or have partnerships in China, and that's something we certainly encourage. Whether we would err on investing in China, that would be only if it was basically a German opportunity that for whatever reason had a very strong Chinese angle. There's a lot of local money in China.
Yes, that's what I've heard.
Yeah. And it is, I think, very hard if you're not really tapped into that community there to know how they're going to consolidate those opportunities to get them public. So I think you need a team on the ground to be successful.
That's the impression I had as well, but I was just interested to hear what you thought about that. But so I suppose to wrap up then, I was just thinking, what do you predict will be the interesting biotech trends in Europe in 2019, 2020, sort of coming forward? I mean, is there anything particular that you've noticed that's new, that's interesting?
Yeah, I think, you know what, 2019 is going to be a year of realism, because we had a couple of really good years. We've seen in 2018, 2007 a couple of huge speculative rounds. My feeling is it's back to the products, it's back to basics, and so this is the trends that I think we see. So we see also, this is a strategy we've been following for a while, and we see more interest also in syndicating from US partners with what we are doing. Okay. So I think I'm predicting a bit of realism, but not in a very positive way.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. That was brilliant. Thank you for coming today.
Well, thanks for having me.